Crystal Bell is with UMKC, and she is one of the folks that I've seen present on the LifeCourse tools. And like I said, we're going to talk more about this as we work on it and work through the rest of the next 2 days. And Crystal, I'm just going to leave a short introduction as that and have you come up and start presenting. Let's hear it from Crystal.
Wow, okay. I will tell you that it doesn't matter how many times that I get up in front of a room full of people, I still get nervous. And so first off, I want to start by thanking you guys for having me. It is always it's always feels really good when somebody asks me to come speak on Charting the LifeCourse, and because it's something that I'm so passionate about, and I know that it can be used in any situation. So before I get started, can I just see a show of hands who is here that is connected to disability professionally? And then family and self-advocates. Awesome, awesome. Thanks, guys, for coming. So Craig told me I have like, I don't know what he called it, some confidence thing, but I'm so short, I can't even actually see it. So I'm going to move this way. So I'll just tell you a little bit about our organization. Missouri Family to Family is housed within our USED, which is our University for Center on Excellence in Developmental Disability. Also works with our LEND. We are a statewide family-to-family organization within your state that is called Families Together. That is the equivalent of what we're doing in Missouri as well. And we have been the Health Information Center for over 25 years. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. So this is my family. This is Peyton. He is on the left. He is 14 and has a Down syndrome diagnosis. Connor is on your right. He will be 13 next month. And he has an autism and ADHD diagnosis. And then Lily is 3. And she is just ridiculously cute, and she plays that for everything it's worth. So that's my crazy household. I am the coordinator for Missouri Family to Family. I've been the coordinator for just a little under a year. So I am new to that position, but I've been working with UMKC and the LifeCourse framework, Charting the LifeCourse framework, for a little over 3 years. And it's really been life-changing in the amount of time that I've been using it. Most of my training and experience has been around family leadership and helping families to learn how to advocate both for themselves and for their loved ones. So I'll just tell you a little bit background on how Charting the LifeCourse got started. There was a conference in 2011, that was called the Wingspread Conference, and I have a couple booklets that explain a little bit more in depth what that Wingspread Conference was. But it was leaders from across the nation got together and said they wanted to change how they supported families. And so in 2012, there was a grant that funded the Supporting Families Community of Practice. There was, I got to count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with Missouri being the mentor state that were in that first community of practice. That went over so well that during the second round, they opened it up and 11 more states joined. Including Hawaii, which was actually my first assignment. So I was really glad that they joined because that was really nice for me. I said I'm sticking with this job forever after that trip. So now there's 17 states in that community of practice. And what those 17 states has committed to doing is using Charting the LifeCourse framework to change the way they're thinking about supports to families and supporting families. There are states all over the United States that are using Charting the LifeCourse framework, but these are the states that have officially committed, and your state is one of them as well. Those are our national funders. So let's just talk a little bit about kind of the current state of our services and supports. So if we think about the reality of what is going on within our service system, there's a lot of new pressures that haven't been there before. There's the demand for services is going up. The capacity of our workforce is also going down. The federal budgets are always changing. We're challenged to do more with less funds, and expectations, values, and cultures are changing. So in the past, families were okay with having children to be segregated or in segregated settings. And now the way society is and the way our expectations are, this is the first generation that has had their peers with disabilities grow up right next to them. And so as things continue, as they hit transition age, they expect for that to continue as well. So that is a challenge in the way that we think about services and supports. If we go back to the very beginning, before there were formal services and supports, the person with the diagnosis or the disability just kind of existed within the context of their family and their community. People around them supported them, and that's just kind of how it was. However, as time went along, people said, we really need some more services and supports to help us out. And so with the best of intentions, we created this formal service system. And we started taking those services and really wrapping them tight around people. And we often called them wraparound services. And the more that we tried, like I said, with the best of intentions to support somebody, those supports actually became the barrier to that person existing within the context of their family. It would either separate them from their family or the family as a whole from existing within the context of their community. But if we're able to take services and supports and we're able to place them appropriately and integrate them throughout a person's life, they once again can exist within the context of their family and their community where they want to be. So when we think about changing from that intensive wraparound services to those integrated supports, we have to look at how we're making that change and thinking about it differently. So over the years, with that transitional change, we've just changed maybe the name that somebody has from a service coordinator to a support coordinator. Maybe we've given them some extra forms to fill out, or sent them to a training on how to fill out some new computer program, but we haven't actually changed the way that people think and the way that people operate. And that's a transformational change. And when you have that transformational change, it truly changes your heart, the way that you're looking at things, the way that you think about things, the way that you're supporting people with disabilities. So all of this goes down to our core belief, and that is that all people and their families have the right to live, love, work, and play, and pursue their life aspirations within their community. And everything that we do, if you look at that first word under our core belief, all people, so all, everything that we do thinking about all. So many times we have such siloed systems, and we think about this, Down syndrome, or we think about specifically about autism, or we think specifically about cerebral palsy, or we think specifically about physical disability and maybe not about intellectual developmental disability. when we think at Missouri Family to Family and UMKC, when we're designing tools, when we're thinking about systems change, we think about the all. So not even just people with diagnosis, but society as a whole and how it can impact everybody. When this core belief was first developed, it did say all people with disabilities and their families have the right to live, love, work, and play. And the more that we said that, the more that we realized that with the best of intentions, we again were creating that barrier and that segregation that we were fighting actually to get rid of. And so it does say all people now, and that is how we think. So when we talk about the guiding principles, we have some guiding principles that really guide our thinking and guide how we operate. So the all people, we do think about all people. And if you look at, we call this our triangle, and you think about the people receiving services, 1 in 4 people receive state paid services with IDD. Now, I'll tell you that when I first saw that and I heard that statistic, I thought, oh my gosh. So there are 3 out of 4 people that are not receiving paid DD services. We have got to get to them. We have got to get them services. And the more that I thought about that and the more that I looked at that, I thought, you know what? What if those 3 out of 4 came knocking on the service system store tomorrow? What would happen? It would collapse, right? I saw a whole bunch of eyes go, oh my God, in fear, right? Just at the thought of it. It would collapse. We wouldn't be able to serve all of them. The other thing to think about is maybe that 3 out of 4, maybe they don't need our services, or maybe they don't want our services. So as researchers, as people that are looking at systems change, we can look at that other 75% and say, how are they making it work? How are they utilizing things within their community, utilizing supports within their family to make it work? And what can we learn from that? The other thing that's important to think about is that you have to know what part of the triangle you're talking about when you're talking about funding, when you're talking about programs. So when you're talking about funding and you're talking about increasing funding or starting a new program or expanding a program, you have to know that you really are talking about that green portion, that 25%. And you aren't talking about the all. Because if you increase funding for services, you're really only reaching the 1 in 4 that's receiving the services. So that's also something to keep in mind and also something to think about when you're thinking about services and supports. How can we think about being able to make things work for the all and not just the 1 in 4 that are receiving services? This is Kansas's triangle. Most triangles throughout the United States are pretty close to the same as far as numbers. They may vary some, and this obviously changes a little bit with legislation that's passed and funding that's passed, but it's pretty close to the same throughout the United States. So this is just specifically and this is just specifically with developmental disabilities as well. But triangles are pretty close to the same no matter what population that you're taking. The next principle that we talk about is the person within the context of their family. So a lot of times when we're planning, we start thinking about that person as if they kind of exist in a vacuum. You know, we write a plan for that person and we're not thinking about the family as a whole. All individuals exist somehow within a context of a family. Now, whether that's family that they're related to, or if it's family that live in the same house, they all exist within the context of the family. It's important to realize the impact of that. It's also important to realize that that family is defined by the individual. So how many of us have blood relatives that we would sometimes not like to claim, right? Pretty much everybody. So when you think about that, somebody with a diagnosis probably feels exactly the same way at times, right? Yet a lot of times we have kind of that preconceived notion that, well, they're your parent, or they're your cousin, or they're your brother, or they're your sister, and therefore we automatically include them in what we consider that to be that person's family. So it's important to know that the family is defined by the individual. It can be fluid. It is not always defined by the people that live within the same four walls as them, and it's not always blood related. How many of us have friends that we almost consider family, closer than people that we are related to by blood? So it's important to include those people in plans and find out who that individual's family is. Up there are 3 pictures. For my children, these are kind of their 3 separate little families that blend together in their world. They're all part of their family and all considered their family. And so when we do plans, we think about, how does it impact things at dad's house? How does it impact cousins and grandma and grandpa? Because they're all considered part of their family. We also have to think about the impact that family has. So I'll tell you a little bit about my family. I grew up in Hiawatha, Kansas. My parents still live in the house that I grew up in for 18 years. And we were not naturally very social people. We had a couple people that we associated with through church. We were homeschooled, actually, through a lot of it. And the impact that my family had on me is completely different than, say, my daughter's father. They grew up, they were a military family, so they can't claim any state because they moved all the time, right? They know hundreds of people throughout the world. His life experiences are completely different than my life experiences. And so it's important to know the background of the individual that you're serving. Biologically, how that family impacts them, their likes, their dislikes, their abilities, medical history, how that impacts them, family policy. In my family, the policy was that you, after high school, you were going to graduate high school, first of all. That was a policy. Second was, after you graduated high school, you were going to get a job. Some families, as soon as you graduate high school, you're going to college. Yet a lot of times when we take someone with a disability or a diagnosis, we just remove that and we say, okay, well, maybe the rest of the family goes to college, but we're just going to find them a job. We need to take that family policy into consideration. How can we help that individual fulfill that family policy and be part of that family? Maybe just a little differently, but how can we help make that happen? How socially are they connected? Again, that social aspect. For some families, social is very important, and it's something that they really want for their child. I am a little bit, I know it's hard to believe, I'm a little bit introverted. So, with my son who has autism, I'm fine if he has 2 friends. I'm okay with that. Whereas another family would not be okay with that. They would need and have a different expectation socially because of the background they came from. You also have to consider environmentally. Did they grow up in a city or in a rural area? Because someone's life experiences are going to be completely different if they grew up on a farm versus growing up in a city. So it's important to know that background and how that's impacted them as well. It's also important to think about what life stages that they're in. So in addition to thinking about what life stage that individual is in, think about what life stage that family's in, the family life cycle. So kind of in the middle, families are in that launching children life cycle. And I think it's important to consider that with the family. And if, all of their friends are launching children, whether they come back or not, if they're launching children, how are we helping that family have that experience too? so that they can still experience all those different life cycles. The other thing that we talk about is one life stage. What happens in one life stage affects all the other life stages down the road. So it's important to look at it as a continuum. The other thing is looking at the family life cycle. The person with the disability isn't always the center. Sometimes it is, maybe brother is getting some big award in Scouts, or maybe mom's going back to college, or maybe there's a new baby in the household. So it's important to factor those in as well in what's going on within the family cycle. With this slide, there's a couple things that are very important to look at. So if you look at caring about and caring for, if you talk to parents and you say, what worries you after you're gone? Well, as parents, we can look at the caring for. And yeah, sometimes it's hard to plan, but I can tell you, I can knock out provider of day-to-day care. I can find a provider. I can find somebody that'll manage the money. But the thing that keeps me up at night, the thing that makes my heart beat fast and my palms sweat and hoping that I never die is those across the top. Who is going to care about my kids when I'm gone? Not because it was written into their plan, not because they're paid to do it. Who's going to call up Peyton and say, hey, Peyton, let's go to the movies, because they know that that's what he likes doing. Or say, hey, Connor, let's go get some pizza. Just because they like spending time with him. Who's going to do that? The other thing that is important about this is that, sometimes I will say as moms, and it's not all moms, some dads are this way, but, we're the ones that have everything up here, right? We know the doctors, we know the diagnosis, we know the medication, we know the favorite blanket, we know the favorite foods. And we think that when we're planning, we have to find somebody that can be that can be all of that. But it's important to remember, too, to have different people. You can have different people. Maybe somebody says, you know what, I know all the foods that they like, so I'm going to take care of that. Or somebody else says, I'm really good with money, but I honestly can't stand hanging out with them. Okay, fine. You take care of the money. You take care of the social. So that's important as well to remember when planning for things in the future. We also can't forget the siblings. As parents, we are there from birth, maybe a little ways, and now it's going to switch on me without me clicking it. We're there from, birth to a little later in their life. Siblings usually are there from beginning to end, right? And a lot of times we forget how to support the siblings. And before I had my daughter, I hadn't really thought so much about this. Like, I had this slide and I talked about it, but when I had my daughter, I really started thinking, she's there all the time and she experiences that all the time. So what am I doing to support her, even as a 3-year-old, to be a normal, typical 3-year-old? And so I consider that even in planning. How are we working in respite time so that she, as a 3-year-old, gets respite from being the sister of a individual with a disability? How do I support her so she can just be a sister sometimes, right? Sometimes you just need to be a sister. You don't need to be somebody that's taking care of a sibling. You just need to be able to be there. How am I helping my kids to be able to be, helping the boys to be able to be brothers to her and not somebody that's always going to therapy or is always having needs? How could they support her as well? So I think it's important to make sure that we consider the siblings and not leave them out. We also talk about having a good life, a vision, and having a trajectory towards that good life. When we think about a vision, we really like using this quote because the future doesn't just happen if we want to have a good future. We have to create it. We have to take steps towards creating that good future. And we can't start going towards that good future unless we have a dream, unless we have something that we're thinking about. We also talk about life experiences and life transitions. So when you say transition, what does everybody think? 14, let's start transition. 16, let's start transition, right? We're thinking about high school. But if you think about it, transitions happen all through life. They're always happening. And how are we planning for those transitions ahead of time and planning to help that person to go through those transitions all throughout their life? The other thing that we talk about, and we'll talk a lot more in depth about it during the trajectory, my breakout next plug right there, is talking about those typical life experiences. So up until my kids were probably 10 or 11, their whole life was therapy, was school, was, just kind of getting the things done at home. But I had never stopped to think about, when are they going to birthday parties? When are they playing with the neighborhood kids? When are they being allowed to take risks? When are they going through those typical life experiences? When are they playing sports? And it wasn't until Peyton was, I think he was 12 when he went to his first birthday party. It was a very short-lived, from 12 to 13, and then they quit having birthday parties. But he went. He did get to go. So it's important to look at what are other kids their age doing? I am the mom that when I go up to the school, I'm always like, what are they wearing? What are they wearing? What words are they using? Because I don't have anything else to gauge. What is a typical kid at this point in time doing? The other thing is, I had to think back to what I was doing. So even doing this for a living, Peyton's teacher sends me an email towards the end of the school year and says, I just wanted to let you know there's not a whole lot of things going on, not a whole lot of opportunities this summer. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this kid, And I started thinking back, what was I doing the summer I was 14? I had a job. I had a paper out, I was swimming. I was doing those things. I need to make those typical life experiences happen for him. He needs to have those typical life experiences because lessons are learned when I'm making mistakes, doing some silly things that I shouldn't be doing, right? Lessons are learned on how to be responsible with those little jobs and those little things. So I even still have to pull myself out of that disability world and say, what's typical? And how do I help my kids have that? Now, it might be different, it might look a little different, but it's still that typical life experience. Another thing that I think is really important is allowing people to have the dignity of risks and to make mistakes. So many times with somebody with a diagnosis makes a mistake, something that we learn from, that we learn our life lessons from, we make it a life sentence. Shelley, our director, always tells the story about her brother. She has an adult brother with a developmental disability. And when he was 5, he decided that he was going to play with some matches. Now, what 5-year-old doesn't play with lighters or matches, right? Especially a boy, because they just want to burn everything up, right? So he takes these matches and he's hiding in the closet and he's playing with them and he lights one on fire and he thinks, oh crap, and he throws it down and he shuts the door. Well, what happens to the closet? Goes up in flames, right? Fire department's called. Next planning meeting, what gets put across his file? It's a fire starter now. When he's 15, what is across his file? It's a fire starter. When he's 25, what's across his file? He's a fire starter. Now, how many times do we take those life lessons and we make them life sentences? Sexual predator, elopement risk, can't use the internet, things like that. We need to learn how to make them life lessons and not life sentences. And give them that dignity of risk. Peyton is always, it scares me to death, but he is always so proud when he gets to take that risk. Actually, this last week, he decided when I had turned my head that he was going to go for a walk in downtown Kansas City. And the day before, I had taken them, thinking, here, I'm gonna help my kids learn how to navigate their community, and I'm gonna take them on the streetcar. So we get on the streetcar and we ride the streetcar downtown and we have lunch and it's a nice experience. And then the next day, Peyton decides, I'm hungry. And what do I do when I'm hungry? I'm going to ride the streetcar. And so, I turn my head and 10 minutes later, I don't know where Peyton's at. And he decided he was going to ride the streetcar. And when we found him, he was so proud of himself. Now, scared me to death, right? I mean, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, all the things that can happen. Somebody on the streetcar gave him a homemade cross necklace. He was very proud of that. But he was so proud that he had been able to take that risk and navigate. We're going to go back and do some preliminary work, so mom's okay with it. But allowing him to have that dignity of risk, he built his confidence. He was proud of himself. So I think that was important for him. Mom just needs baby steps. I can't do a whole streetcar ride by myself with him. The other thing that we talk about is life domains. So I know that this is an employment summit. I know that we are all thinking employment. And that's important. But what's important to remember is that it's just an important piece of what we're doing. To have a good life, we need to consider it to be a part of the whole. So we call these life domains kind of our cocktail party questions. When you meet somebody, what are some of the things that you ask them? Where do you work? What do you do? Where do you live? Who are your friends? What social clubs do you belong to? And so many times when we start planning, we get so focused on our one domain. So you might have your, not picking on anybody, Bureau of Special Healthcare Needs, and they're very focused on that health piece, right? But we're not thinking about the person's life as a whole. This is what makes your life interesting. A lot of times as parents, we get stuck on that safety and security, and that's all we're thinking about to the exclusion of everything else. So it's important to look at all these life domains together to have a colorful and full life. So this is probably my favorite tool. This is the Integrated Support Star. And we're going to talk a lot about the Integrated Support Star in the third one. I'm going to come back to that bucket slide. So the Integrated Support Star is really where I had my aha moment as a parent. And this talks about all the different supports that are in a person's life. So there's personal strengths and assets, relationships, technology, community-based supports, and eligibility supports. Now, we're going to go more in depth in this afternoon, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. But community-based supports, I feel like it's always important to highlight. These are supports in the community that anyone can use. This is not paid supports in the community, okay? Paid supports are the eligibility specific. Anything that you have to qualify for. Community-based are supports that anyone can use, regardless of who they are. So this Integrated Support Star can be used for mapping. It can be used for problem solving. There's a lot of different ways that it can be used. So now I get to talk about my most favorite part. I like all of it, but this is where I get to talk about our family and what an amazing thing that Charting the LifeCourse has done for us. So I'll start with before and kind of how things looked before. This is our before star. It's a little bit difficult to read. But if you look at this support star, can you see what category we had all our supports in, most of our supports? It's in that eligibility specific. So we lived in Southeast Missouri, and before I got divorced, we didn't qualify for anything. So this is after the divorce. After the divorce, I qualified for everything. The system just opened its arms to me and said, what do you need? And I needed that support at that time. And so I started taking some PCA hours. We were taking Medicaid. We were doing food stamps. I had Pell Grants. And more, we kept taking from the eligibility supports. And I felt like, okay, the more support we get, the better our life is going to get, the better things are going to be for us. We did Special Olympics, which in itself is not bad. We saw specialized dentists. We played on special baseball teams. This picture right here, this is Peyton holding our PCA's grandson. That was the extent of our social network. Our emergency contact at school was our PCA. When it came time to have a birthday party for Peyton, who did I invite? Our PCA. We didn't know anybody else. We didn't have a social support outside of our paid services. We went to school. We eventually got to where we could go to the movies. That's what that picture is. We'd gone to the movies. And we stayed at home. And we had a PCA. So that was our life. And, I thought life was pretty good. It was decent. We were getting through. I got connected with UMKC and Charting the LifeCourse, and I started thinking about inclusion. I started thinking about how I wanted my kids included, and I just wasn't happy with where they were. And a position opened up in Kansas City to be a family partner for the Bureau of Special Healthcare Needs, which I was doing in Southeast Missouri. And so here I thought, I'm going to go to Kansas City. They are progressive. They are going to know how to do inclusion, right? So we go up. I changed my slides, so we go up to Kansas City, and I'm still on all of those eligibility supports. So I'm going to backtrack just a little bit and talk about when we were on the eligibility supports, what are some things that I thought about? What if my program doesn't get funded, right? What if this job that I'm going to take, how much does it pay? Because I got to still qualify, right? Because I need my supports. Where will we have to live? Because I'm getting Section 8. So what are my choices for living? This, right? What will I do if my car breaks down? Because I can't have too many resources. Who I date was determined. If we got married, that would mean our resources would be too high, so I wouldn't qualify. So that drove who I dated. What if my hours get cut? So I can't look at how good we're doing. I have to make sure they know how bad we're doing so that we still qualify. Making sure that they are bad enough. Fear is what drove my life. Fear of losing anything in the green, because that's where all my eggs were. That's what filled my basket. So I moved to Kansas City, and I'm thinking, I'm going to get even more of this, and my life will be better, because you just keep thinking, if you just get more of it, then you're going to be okay. And I wasn't seeing that my life was being driven by fear. So we go to the school, and I start looking at his IEP that had transferred, and I see that he actually has less inclusion in Southeast Missouri, or in Kansas City, than he had in Southeast Missouri. And I'm going, what? They should know how to do inclusion. And so I left that IEP meeting, and I was so frustrated. And I cry when I'm frustrated, so I'm one of those parents that's crying at your IEP meetings just because I'm so frustrated. And while I was family partner, I would call families that were having problems and I'd say, hey, you know what? There's this Charting the LifeCourse website. Go there. You can solve your problems. It'll help you get through that. And when I left that IEP meeting, I had a really good friend say, hey, Crystal, those Charting the LifeCourse tools you're always telling people to go use? Maybe you should try it. And I thought, well, I'm backed in a corner and I don't have anywhere else to go. And, I just moved all the way across the state and I'm like 6 months pregnant and all this. And so I go home and I fill out a trajectory for Peyton. And I sit there and I put down what I think my vision of a good life for him would be. And I wrote out 8 copies with colored pencils. I color-coded them according to the star and the different domains. And I took this back into the IEP meeting and I said, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with where Peyton's going. And so we talked about the vision for a good life and everyone is nodding their head. Yes, yes, we all want that. Friends, family, meaningful relationships. But when I started talking about the things that we didn't want, everyone kind of paused. And they started to see that maybe some of the programs they had him in were not leading him towards the things that we wanted. Now, I would love to say that they went and said, oh, inclusion, our bad. Let's fix this, right? It doesn't happen like that. So time is what it took for us. This is Peyton's star. And what I did was I took Peyton's star and I color-coded a schedule for him. And I said, do you see all this stuff on the outside? As a mom, that's for me to handle. That's for me to make colorful, to have supports come from all different areas. That part in the middle, that's school. And I need your help to make this colorful because we all deserve a colorful life, right? We like to be around people that are like us. That's why we go to church. That's why we go to bars. That's why we're on bowling leagues. That's why we're on social clubs, because we like being around people that are like us. But we don't want to live there, right? You get pretty sick of being around people that are exactly like you all the time. So I said, we need to make this colorful. And they said, okay, we will make it colorful. There at the top, we're going to put Peyton in the general education classroom for 5 minutes in the morning. We'll start with that. And I walked out of there. I'm the parent, right? I'm the parent that's like, I got inclusion. Here we go. And for 5 minutes every day for 2 weeks, my son sat outside the door and refused to go in. And I thought, here I am. I am being an advocate. I am trying to blaze a trail, and you are fighting me. But you know what I didn't realize at the time? We had written a really good plan for Peyton. But it wasn't Peyton's plan. It wasn't where he needed to be. And so I had to learn over the years that inclusion, full inclusion for Peyton, wasn't his idea of a good life. He needed some time in that special ed setting. He needed some time around some of his peers that understood what it was like not to be like everybody else, or understood when an aide had to go with him to the restroom and was like, meh, that's just like what I have to do. He needed some of that. So today he doesn't have full inclusion, but he has a really good mix for himself. This is his portfolio now. One of the other things that we do to create that team atmosphere is I leave this middle portion blank. So on the school and I believe the employment portfolio, there's this blank section for action steps for the future and things that we need to avoid. And so we use this during our planning meetings and say, let's fill this out together. The things on the left are things that we know either did or didn't work. And then let's fill out that middle and find some action steps together as a team. The other thing that I love about these tools is that you can adapt them to any situation. So for Peyton, if you ask him what his good life is, he's going to tell you pizza. Now, if we're planning for him, we need something other than pizza, right, to go on. So that top portion, it has what he considers to be a good life. Friends, watching movies, things like that. What is on the bottom part are, as responsible adults, the things that we need to start looking towards and planning towards. Having good employment, friends, how are we helping him have good health? So I was able to set it up that way. That way he has a voice within his IEP. Now, communication is a real issue for Peyton, so we have an accessible way for him to talk about what his good life is. And if you'll notice there in the middle, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a picture of him with the Chiefs cheerleader. And he will be quick to point out that girls are in his good life. So we better make that part of his plan somewhere. Girls, preferably petite and blonde, apparently. And so he points that out, and that's in his IEP. And he sits through every single one of his meetings now. And we use this framework not just for writing an IEP, but when something comes up. He had an issue where he ran away from school. And of course, we had to have a meeting. And I brought the trajectory in and I said, I don't really care what we do. The advocate part of me says we're not doing a one-on-one aid. But if you can show me on this trajectory where the action that we're proposing is it on the trajectory towards his good life, or is it leading him towards the things that we don't want? If it's on his trajectory towards a good life, I will agree to anything you propose. And at the end of that meeting, we all got up, we all had smiles on our faces, we all hugged each other. Who does that in an IEP, right? Especially one where the director of special ed 2 years before was sitting in, and we were butting heads so bad. It has changed the dynamic. I can talk pretty much every day with Peyton's teacher. And I just didn't have the time, but I was going to include a letter that she had wrote about how it had changed our relationship. And she is probably one of Peyton's biggest advocates today for inclusion. And during that first meeting, I'll tell you, she was not. And it's definitely changed her perception. And I can trust her. She can call me about an issue and I can say, Jane, you do whatever you think is best for him. And I can trust that she will make that right call. This is Peyton's good life now. He, this last year, was the manager of the 8th grade basketball team. This is a kid that when he was born, his dad and I said, it's okay. He'll live in a trailer in our backyard when he grows up. That was our expectation. We didn't see anything wrong with that. But today, Peyton, manager of the basketball team, and when they did the introductions during Spirit Day and it came time to introduce Peyton, the entire auditorium stood up and cheered. Everyone in that school knows him. There's a picture of him rock climbing. He went rock climbing with some college students at Rockhurst. He is in the choir. There's not a person that he walks by at the school that doesn't say, hey, Peyton. He has a community there. And that community is what keeps him safe. Oh, it's going to start. Okay. This is Peyton presenting at our showcase about his good life. And it's hard to hear right now. What he's doing is typing on his iPad. So this year, Peyton was manager of the 8th grade basketball team.
Yes.
And you can see that he's not scared to get up in front of people and advocate for himself. And he really does. Despite his communication issues, he really feels like his voice is valued, even if you're not understanding. So at our house, it's a bit like charades all the time, because if you can't understand what he's saying, he looks around for a prop, or he starts doing signs that he makes up. So he wanted to be a man with the men, and all the men were drinking beer. And so he decided he wanted a beer, but how do you sign beer? I'm not going to teach my kid how to sign beer. So he decides he's going to make up his own, and it is ch. So it is always a little bit like charades with him. He is resourceful at figuring out how to tell you what he wants. But I think the important thing is that he knows that his voice is valued. And I've seen a lot of change in him since feeling like that, starting to feel like he had something to contribute. Now with Connor, he is a little bit higher functioning. And as far as his communication, he communicates pretty well. And, you know, the squeaky wheel is the one that gets the grease. So I'm having all these issues with Peyton over here, and I'm using the LifeCourse, and Connor gets ready to go to 6th grade. And in our district, 6th grade is held, the entire district comes to one building for 6th grade. And I thought, oh my gosh, he had landed in a great school for 4th and 5th grade year. They did such a good job of creating an environment for him where people understood him. I got a call one day that he had kicked a girl. And the teacher went to the girl and said, you know, are you okay? And let's get Connor over here and he can apologize. And she said, that's okay. He just didn't know what he was trying to say to me. They created that kind of environment for my son. And I wanted to just say, let's just stay here for another, 12 years. But he had to go to 6th grade. So I said, okay, Connor, this is a big transition, and let's start using Charting the LifeCourse. And I talk a lot about Charting the LifeCourse all the time at home. So I get out his portfolio and I set it down on the table, and he goes, homework. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay, that's not going to work. So I put that away. And I say, hey, Connor, what's your good life? And he rolls his eyes because I'm always talking about good life. And I said, okay, just forget that. If you think about what your best day ever is when you're all grown up, what does that look like? And I'm sitting at the table, and Connor's pacing, and he's talking. And he's telling me things like, have a girlfriend, have kids, live in New York City. These are things that I did not know about my son, because I had not taken that time to ask. I didn't know how to ask. So we see these tools and we start thinking about filling out these tools, but it's not about these papers. It's about the conversations that you have when you're thinking this way and when you're wanting to fill out the papers. It's changing the way that you're thinking about it. So we got this filled out, and we got ready for the meeting, and I took him to the grocery store, and I said, first thing you have to do in a meeting is you got to go buy some sugar, because sugar makes everyone happy. So we went to the grocery store and we bought sugar, we bought juice and donuts, and he passed them out at his meeting, and he passed out his portfolio. And Connor, though he's very vocal, though he has a good vocabulary, putting those thoughts together is difficult for him sometimes. So he sat there and he told everybody what his good life was. Now, I, of course, had to adult it a little, and in parentheses, those are my things that I put next to what he wanted. But he was able to have that voice in his IEP meeting. And he was able to advocate for himself. And let me tell you, this started some self-advocacy that some days I just want to rein in a little, because he will tell me when I tell him he can't have something that I'm not helping him have a good life. And so it's a double-edged sword there. However, when he comes home and he says he doesn't want to do homework, okay, Connor, that's fine. Tell me where no homework goes on this trajectory. Where's it getting you? Right? Instead of having that fight, he gets to choose. And I will tell you, sometimes he chooses no homework. He'll say, it's on that bottom part. And I say, okay, so is that where you want to go? And he'll tell me, yes. And I say, all right. And so he is able to make that decision for himself. Now, he doesn't like it when he comes home with a D, but I show him that has gotten you to where you don't want to go. So let's make the decisions to where you want to go. So it's really put that in his hands and he can advocate for himself. I told you what our life was like before. We had never got on trips. We really didn't go and venture out and do anything together. Connor, after filling out that portfolio, I was like, New York? You like New York? So he earned a trip to New York this last summer for his birthday by completing self-care tasks in the morning. And I'll tell you, I was sweating how I was going to pay for it. I didn't think that he would actually get there, and we got close and things worked out for us to be able to go. But he increased that portion of his STAR, that personal strengths and assets, by improving his self-care skills and his responsibility, getting up and doing those things in the morning, getting ready for school. So he's also on the choir. He's really developed a talent for drawing as well. And those are things that, you know, he was strictly video games before. And he really has a vision for what he wants to do and where he wants to go. So this is Connor presenting about his good life. I asked him to give me 2 slides on what life was like before LifeCourse and what life was like after. And he came to me with 12. So I said, all right, let's pare this down a little.
Peyton Prologue. Peyton was born in 2003 and I was born as 2005 as brothers. I'm autism and Peyton is DS, which is Down syndrome, by the way. We are brothers in a small town, which is Papa, Missouri. Well, we just lived there a long time until we moved to Kansas City, and then Lily and Cat Wilder came along when he was born in 2015, which is May 19th, and it was stages 2. Peyton is 2 years older than me since he was born in 2003, and he's age 14. And now our feature presentation. All right, part 1, Poplar Bluff, Missouri, 2005 to 2007. I was born in Springfield, Missouri, whatever hospital it is. Cox out. Good. I did get confused. Anyways, Cox out. Whatever. And I lived next to a farm in a small town called Mountain Grove, Missouri. And I lived my life as a rural boy, a small town boy, with my brother Peyton. 2008 to 2013, I moved to Poplar, Missouri, and we was at school. I was at school from Missouri, Poplar Bluff School District from 2008 to 2009 to 2014. Also, I was moving from house to house, and within the small town Poplar, Missouri, and I know that. And now I'm still a small town boy with my brother Peyton. And years have passed. 2002, part 2, Kansas City, Missouri. After the years have passed, 2014. After the miserable times in Poplar, Missouri.
Sorry. Oh.
It's okay. After the when years have passed. From Poplarville, Missouri, I was moved to Kansas City. Once was a rural boy, it was a small town, but now a suburban boy and an urban boy. And now I can see Legoland, which I've been to for a few times. Worlds of Fun, never been to. Downtown Kansas City, and a whole lot more within the big city. I just also see downtown a lot. 2016 to 2018. Now, my first day was at middle school, was the best of all Parkville School District, and so on and so forth. I'm the coolest kid at Lakeview School. This was what I used to. Anyways, since then, I was doing my best to get to high school, and I've been waiting my whole life to be better than before. Epilogue. Anyways, so epilogue. That's my story from 2005 to 2018 now. Thank you for coming to my presentation, which is part my life story from 2005 to 2018, and I hope you take it. Never mind. I'm just canceled taking the notes. I hope you will listen to my story from 2018 to now, and I hope you've been convinced as a normal 12-year-old boy. Thank you very much. Thank
you. He's not shy either. So, in his own words, he was miserable before. And he had a very segregated life, and he is so excited now to be around friends. Now, obviously, with the autism diagnosis for him, friends are pretty hard, and he continually works at it, but he loves to be around other kids that are his age. I am pretty much out of time, but I'm going to try and squeeze this in. Probably the most drastic change has been for our family as a whole. So I looked at what I'd done with Peyton and Connor and the way things that had happened. And I said, you know what? Why can't I just do this for Lily? So I did it for Lily. When she started preschool, we took in the portfolio. They could know about her. And then I started thinking, you know what? Why don't I do this for me? Before doing this, I did not have a direction. I was the mom, single mom on all of the government services. I had no retirement. I had no savings. I really didn't have anywhere that I was going with a career, because if you advance, you're going to lose services. I was taking all kinds of different college classes because I qualified for Pell Grant. You can pretty much go to school indefinitely as a single mom, right? I didn't really have a direction, and I was stuck. For 10 years, I was stuck in that probably grief stage. We got up in the morning and I thought, okay, 8 hours, let's get through this. And I would fall into bed at night and say, thank God, nobody died, nobody's in the hospital, we made it. And that was just every day. And when I started filling this out as a person removed from my role as a mom, I got to look and say, what are my goals for a good life? What do I want? That front page is a one-page profile, which, there's a million of those out there, but I had to say what do people like and admire about me? And I thought about it. I couldn't come up with anything. And I had to call a friend. And I had a friend, and I asked her. And it was something that was so life-changing for me to sit there and think about myself outside of my mom role. And where were we going as a family? Did I want family vacations? Did I want to have a retirement? I had to think beyond that. So I took and did this, and our family went from a family that consumed, those paid services. We were consumers to now we contribute. I get to pay taxes. For the first time in my life, I have a 401k. I can look forward to retirement. I can think about what life is going to be like. And, that's not to say that I did the LifeCourse framework and now my life is just so easy and I just glide and it's great and it's, it's life. But it helps me. It gives me something to always go back to when I need to make a decision. I have a big trajectory on the wall of my office where I have my good life is up on one part of the wall and the things I don't want are down on the bottom. And when I think about decisions I have to make, I think about where does it fit? And it helps me think beyond, let's just get through the day. So it has been so life-changing. Like I said, I grew up in a very small town. My family does not have college education. We'd never been anywhere really other than some road trips. Now I've flown across the United States. I'm running races in states. I'm getting to do things that I never thought possible. And that's because I started having a vision and started working towards that and started problem solving. So that is why I am so incredibly passionate about this framework and how it can change people's lives. And it isn't about those tools. It's about changing the way that you're thinking and looking at things. So, and then everybody always asks for cute baby pictures at the end. So these are your cute baby pictures for the day. So I do have a breakout after this where we're going to talk about trajectory. And then this afternoon, we're going to talk a lot about how we can use the STAR to think differently about employment. But you can tell that it can be used in so many areas of your life. So I really thank you guys for listening and letting me go over my time a little bit. And I hope you guys have a good rest of the day. Thank you.